We'll go ahead and get started then. So this is the Islamic Art Forms lecture. So I begin by defining what art is. This is my definition of art. Art is the expression of anything conceivable. So as you can see, I put some lovely images in here. Spaghetti monster, the cat wearing the fez hat, and then the colorful explosion. So just to give like a good base definition of what we're going to be looking at. All of this is art. All of this entire PowerPoint, this entire presentation is art. So art is the expression of anything conceivable. So I split Islamic art into two categories. So there's theological Islamic art and there's cultural Islamic art. Theological Islamic art is usually governed by the Sharia, as I have listed here. It usually features Quranic passages. It focuses on devotion. Like the main focus of theological Islamic art is devotion. So specifically devotion. And then cultural Islamic art has an emphasis on design and pattern. It's a lot more abstract. So it doesn't necessarily focus directly on the Quran or Hadith or Sharia. Although the things that inspired this cultural Islamic art, because it's Islamic, right, was or is governed by the Sharia. So, but it's not necessarily governed by the Sharia in and of itself. Our first section is going to be calligraphy, which is very beautiful. Calligraphy emerged in the early 7th century with the first penning down of the first manuscripts of the Quran. So I have a couple of the earliest manuscripts of the Quran that we have still today. The Birmingham manuscript, which has been carbon dated to between 568 to 645 AD, and then the top copy, which is dated between 651 and 750 AD. Now you can see that you could classify this as calligraphy because of the pen that's used to write the information down is a flat nib. So you have wider areas in the stroke pattern, and then you have narrower areas. So it gives a good like depth and contrast to the piece. It's not just like completely linear or a one size kind of writing. This is a good example of the size of the Birmingham manuscript. It's just a couple of pages, but this is one of the experts holding the page right there, a couple of pages. This is another early manuscript, and you can see there aren't any designs around the letters, so nothing's really stylized. Even though you could classify it as calligraphy, there aren't like any colorful diacritical markings, no like dots with colors or anything like that, and it's not meant to be observed as like a picture or an art in and of itself. It's meant to be read. This is something that's meant to be read, so there aren't any designs. This is another close-up. Now in the top copy, there are a little bit of designs. There's a small amount of designs, some different colors of diacritical marking, and then you see the red squiggly lines up there, so that like sections the piece off. This is another example, and you can see the thickness that I'm talking about. The difference in the thickness depending on how the pen is grazed across the paper. So that makes it pretty beautiful. And that's another picture of the red squiggly lines and then all the dots up here. A little bit of decoration, but not that much. So the earliest manuscripts of the Quran were written on material such as parchment paper and gazelle skin, also on bones, which deteriorate, so we don't have them anymore, and other types of paper that also deteriorated very easily. But what we have still now is things, manuscripts that were printed on things like parchment paper and gazelle skin. And the ink that was used for this was made from organic material and minerals, so things like clay and dyes derived from different organic materials like vegetables and fruits and leaves and different things like that. And these are some good examples of the types of pens. One type of reed pen specifically that calligraphers still use to this day, actually, to calligraphize things. So you can see a couple of people holding the calligraphy pens, and you'll notice that most of them are flat, but some of them are not flat, and that's usually used for like diacritical markings, the little dots and squiggles that you see above the main bodies of characters. And these are reeds. So these are reeds, and the way that they'll prepare these to write with, they'll take a knife and they'll sharpen it down to a point, and they'll get that nice flat edge, which makes those differences in the thickness of the characters that you see. So around the Middle Ages, calligraphy gradually began to incorporate more ornamentation. So clearly we can see that this is a lot more prominent. So like the design is a lot more prominent here. Even though there's Arabic inside of the design, it's gold. It's gold and it's green, and also the design on the side here is a lot more prominent. So there's a heavy focus, or a more heavy focus, on the designs surrounding the letters and the text. So the focus of manuscripts began to shift away from simply reading the words, and this shift away from just reading the words is what turned calligraphy into a fine art, the beautification, if that's a word, of the script. So we have things like this, absolutely magnificent, right? And this isn't meant to be read completely linearly, clearly. I mean, you have designs all over the place. You have these sections up here that curve down and then across, and it is an art form in and of itself. So this beautification has been exemplified, and all the colors and contrasting textures and different things like that really make the piece beautiful. This is another example. And those really beautiful designs. So, yeah. Magnifying, I guess you could say, the meaning of the text, because it's really important. Like the Arabic script is very important because that's what the Quran was written in, and that's what Hadith are written in as well. So two very important religious texts for Muslims. This is another great example, and this incorporates like vegetation elements, like organic elements, so like the leaves and stuff like that. And there's a really great contrast prominent contrast between the blue and the goldish yellow. And the border is also really well defined, and each word seems to have its own distinct place in the piece. So we have like names of prophets here, so like Muhammad salam and a few other prophets. So yeah, really beautiful. And there's another example. This is using green and red with some really nice designs along the top. And this is really interesting, because not only are there designs around the words and letters, but there are also designs inside the bodies of these characters. So they really took it to like a whole nother level, really beautifying this piece of writing. So the impact of stylized calligraphy was being embraced throughout the Islamic world and beyond. Its incorporation into large projects such as architecture and mosaics, it was merely just a matter of time because it was so popular. Everybody thought it was beautiful. As Islam was spreading all throughout the world, I mean, you see something like this, and the general characteristics that this has they're beautiful to most people. Most people see like pattern and color and complementations of those things, and they think it's beautiful. So it was just merely a matter of time before this spread into other larger projects. So now we're going to talk about mosaics. One of the first mosaics to be constructed was done so on the surface of the Kaaba, actually. According to Masudi's 10th century account of the Kaaba's alteration near the end of the 7th century. So kind of separated, by 300 years, but this is what we have. The majority of this addition to the Kaaba was removed, but the incorporation of mosaics in Islamic architecture was just beginning. So that was the first example, the addition to the Kaaba, but later on, great example right here, the Dome of the Rock. So this was constructed around 690 AD, and it's one of the first Islamic buildings to heavily incorporate Islamic or Mosaic patterns. So if we look at the surface, extremely intricate, and we have the Islamic calligraphy bordering all around the entire perimeter of the building. and also some larger phrases near like arches or incorporated into the arches. But this entire thing is like basically one big mosaic. And how the mosaics were constructed. So, or like at least the coloring compounds, the coloring agents. So the materials used to construct Islamic mosaics include porcelain tiles. So they used porcelain and clay materials to construct the tiles. And then mortar or some form of bonding agent to act as an adhesive so that the tiles would stick to the surface. And then coloring agents such as lapis lazuli, which is what this is. This is a raw mineral of lapis lazuli with its usual pyrite inclusions. Lapis lazuli tends to generate in the same environment that pyrite does, so there are usually pyrite inclusions in that, which gives it a lighter color when it's mashed up like this. And then the final step being applying that to the porcelain pieces and then arranging it in a really beautiful pattern like that. And this is another close-up of the Dome of the Rock, and we can see the patterns that are really unique to Islamic areas of the world. So like these star patterns, and also like, what are they? They're like two squares placed on top of each other, shifted at an angle, and it kind of looks like a star. That's also a Muslim pattern as well. And then the incorporation of organic elements. So like the flowers and the leaves, really leaves in this. But the contrast as well, that's something really notable. And then the calligraphy right in the center. So calligraphic mosaics are incorporated into designed mosaics to emphasize the theological characteristics of the times and places they were constructed in. Mainly to emphasize the theological characteristics, or like what a building was meant to do. A building like a mosque. A mosque is meant to be prayed in. You're meant to learn things about the faith, about the Islamic faith inside of a mosque. So you would have calligraphy, basic calligraphy like this, blown up into a porcelain mosaic like this, and then beautified with all the organic patterns around it. And that's something commonly seen. Here's a great example of that above an archway in, I believe this is Iran. I believe this is in Iran archway. Yeah, really beautiful. Has those organic compounds, those organic designs. Yeah, really nice. That's a close-up of one of them. This is a different kind of design, so it's not linear, it's circular. So once again, stylizing something that is inherently Muslim and inherently Islamic. So creating a piece of art based on the theology of Islam. Here's another picture of an archway, doorway, and there's another circular pattern. And that has really great contrast between the like the off yellow color of the calligraphy and then the dark green of the background. And also in the center, you're almost like directed toward the center of this piece, which is a spiral, spiraling porcelain colors down, and then the chain that's hosting the chandelier. And this is a theory of mine. So the repetition of Arabic characters in Islamic calligraphy likely influenced the general characteristics of Islamic mosaics. So if we take these two examples, on the left we have a manuscript, an old manuscript, and then on the right we have a mosaic. They don't seem like they're related, but my theory is that the general characteristics of Arabic writing influenced the mosaic. So we see emphasis on linear patterns and then the diacritical markings. We see linear and vertical patterns and then these organic designs in the center. So I think there might be a parallel to be drawn between those two. As the Islamic world expanded and began intertwining with other cultures, the art of Islamic mosaic design began to separate into its own definable category. So not focusing on religion so much. It's not really focused on Quranic text, or at least the meaning of Quranic text, right? So this is what I call the separation from theology. Because in this example, we don't see any calligraphy. There's no calligraphy, there's no obvious connection between this picture and something like a Quran page or Hadith page or something like that. So like this. There's almost no writing, no writing. But if you recognize these down at the bottom, this is ancient Iranian writing. So that's a part of theology that has been incorporated into a largely what could be called a secular piece. I mean, it's Islamic art because it's been inspired, or it's been inspired by Islamic events, but not necessarily the Islamic text. So these brilliant designs incorporating a variety of colors and designs, really, really absolutely magnificent. Here's 3 more examples right here. No text. There's no text. There's no calligraphy. There's no obvious connection. So largely secular and therefore universally appreciable. There's another one. I would say that the only obvious connection that you could draw between this image and something related to religion is this dome figure in the center. So that's what you see on the tops of a lot of mosques. So that could represent something theological, but the connection isn't obvious. It's not a direct connection. These are some examples of mosaics from different parts of the Islamic world. So Algeria, you can notice some differences. So blues, greens, and whites in this. And then this, Morocco. Darker green, yellows, like an off yellow color, the cyan, like the light white blue color. And then like the brick clay color. They're all different across different parts of the world. Spain, different kind of design, much more organic, right? These little flowers you see here, and then the petals, and you can see it's a plant. You know, it looks a lot like a plant, and incorporating different colors. So this is like really dark blue or like a blackish gray, contrasting the gold and the tan, like clay color of the border as well. And this is India. Heavy emphasis on organics. Heavy emphasis. I mean, there's, aside from the borders of these individual panels, there aren't many straight edges. These are curved, they're organically flowing, but they're mirrored. They're mirrored and they're symmetrical, which makes it a complementary piece. So mosaics were usually constructed on much larger structures, as we have seen. Ceilings, walls of mosques, walls of government buildings, prestigious houses, even like mansions and things like that. Sometimes rich people would commission large projects and have brilliant mosaics placed on their abodes. So adding exquisite beauty and cultural characteristics to buildings of importance. So we notice that from those countries that I mentioned, Algeria, Morocco, Spain, and India, the 4 mosaics were similar because they're porcelain. They had some similar colors, but the design was fundamentally different. The design was different. The focus on terminations, like where points ended, and central designs, it was different throughout them all. And that is the case as you go throughout the Islamic world. You'll notice that pieces of the culture that had existed before the arrival of Islam are integrated into the artwork because it's a form of expression. So the people are experiencing something and they're expressing that through artwork. So architecture, one of the things that have, that's an expression of artwork. So there are borrowed characteristics from Christian architecture. Christian architecture is ancient. It's really ancient. So things like domes, arches, and mosaics are borrowed elements from Christian architecture. We can see right here, this is a Christian cathedral. I believe it's in Europe somewhere. And we see the dome right there. We see the archway. And even the steeples. Even the steeples, it could be said that the minarets hold some sort of parallel with the steeples. But I don't say that there. So, but integrating aspects of Islamic theology into these pre-existing features. So once again, it's an amalgamation. When an ideology spreads throughout the world, it is inevitably amalgamated and combined with the existing ideologies that it has introduced itself into. So minarets, calligraphy, emphasis on repetition patterns, these are all Islamic characteristics, right? And so emphasis on repetitious patterns, domes, mosaics, and concave textures, which we will see in due course. So earliest forms of distinctly Islamic architecture, one I've already mentioned is the Dome of the Rock. And then another one is the Great Mosque in Damascus. So the Dome of the Rock was built around 690 AD, like I've already said, and then the Great Mosque in Damascus was built around 715. So a characteristic of the Dome of the Rock, which is a borrowed idea from Christian architecture, is the dome. But we see that an Islamic twist has been integrated. So we have this ornament on the very top. It's an Islamic ornament. At the very top, on the termination, it has the crescent moon, representation of the crescent moon, which is a symbol of Islam. And then the Christian arches, once again, the Dome of the Rock. Christian arches, we see right here, integrated into a mosque. And also columns, which is borrowed from Christian architecture, which the Christians borrowed from the Italians, which the Italians borrowed from the Greeks. So it's this continuing tradition of borrowing things, right? Nothing is really inherently original. It's all borrowed ideas from things that have happened in the past. And the Christian mosaics. So in many instances, when Islam was expanding, when the Islamic Empire was first undergoing that massive expansion, I mean, from at the height of its length, extending from all the way in the west, from Spain, to all the way in the east to China and India. And when the Islamic military would conquer certain places, there was a tradition of taking objects, so like the bounties of war, that's what it's called. And many elements that were incorporated into Islamic architecture were deconstructed from previously existing buildings. So I call these, this picture right here is titled Christian Mosaic because many times the Muslim military would deconstruct Christian places of worship, which had mosaics and different things like that. And they would carefully take the mosaics, the little pieces of porcelain, and then they would integrate it into their buildings. So it's an amalgamation, see? Keeps on going. So the Great Mosque in Damascus has one of the first, really individual Islamic qualities, and that's the minaret. Even though I said that, like, my theory is that the minarets could have been derived from the steeples, I don't really have any great connections there other than like the general look of it. So Islamic minaret, it's really centrally Islamic. And these are really beautiful. These are some really beautiful minarets from Iran. Iran has some great artwork, and they make great use of the tones of blue and contrasting colors. So we have Islamic mosaics, calligraphy, concave patterns. Even though it's technically not Arabic calligraphy, it's ancient Iranian, it kind of falls under the same category. But these are distinctly Islamic characteristics. So negative, the concave patterns are negative features that's very common to see in like Iranian architecture that's featured here. Concave patterns. You don't really see that anywhere else in the same style. And the mosaics, obviously, we see the writing, and then the calligraphy is the writing, and then the mosaics are the individual tiles that make up the exterior of the structure. So another characteristic of Islamic architecture are the repetition of domes. So Islamic domes we see here. Great example. Not sure where it's from, but it's really beautiful, really colorful. And then on the right, we see no color. So monochromatic on the right, and then super colorful on the left. And the colors and the characteristics of certain Islamic architecture hold a direct relationship with the point of view that the government holds in relation to the Sharia. So like leniency, things like that, like with color. So this is a lot more flamboyantly colored than something like this. So the government who commissioned, or the people who commissioned the architecture on the right, may have viewed flamboyant colors and things like that a distraction from worship, right? But on the left, they don't seem to have a problem with that, and they may even make the case that it beautifies and entices the observer to worship because it's beautiful. Here's a great example from India. So that's another mosque, a repetition of domes, and then borrowed elements from originally Greek architecture, so the columns. Here's the Taj Mahal, great example of Islamic architecture. Once again, the repetition of domes and then the distinctly Islamic minarets. And largely monochromatic, so one color. And here's another Iranian example. Multiple domes, once again, and the calligraphy and mosaic patterns on the outside, distinctly Islamic characteristics. And this is an interior view of an Islamic dome. And we see a couple things here. We see the repetition of pattern, but also the repetition of texture. This is a heavy emphasis, one of the heavy emphases in Islamic art form expressions, the repetition of really what would be normally small ideas, or something that would be minimally incorporated into a Western architecture, is taken and expounded upon, and they spread it across the ceiling like this, and it's absolutely beautiful. I mean, that's really great. So the concave patterns, concave textures, and then the complementing and contrasting colors, and then the tops of the domes you can see are the circles in the center. So repetition of domes. Here's another example. Once again, we see the repetition of the domes from an interior perspective, and the use of blue. The use of blue. Really great, really beautiful. And this is an example of the inside of the entrance to a mosque. So it's technically an interior view that demonstrates the Islamic concave texture, but if you were to stand in front of this and then turn around and face the other way, it would be completely open into a courtyard. So there's no door or anything separating this from the outside. But it definitely exemplifies that Islamic characteristic, the repetition of concave textures and patterns, and also Islamic calligraphy right there. Another interior view of some concave repetitious patterns. Here's a beautiful example again from Iran. Iran produces some really nice art. We have the dome, the silhouette, I guess you could call, of the dome, which is an Islamic feature, and then the concave texture right there, and then the repetition of the mosaic patterns in every single one of those, and the organic designs around the corners. There's another example with ancient Iranian text. So once again, art from Iran. So Islamic architecture defined itself as a brilliant form of expression, serving practical and artistic purposes. Many forms of Islamic culture that would have otherwise been lost to time, including architecture, have been captured in the canvases of painters. So painting is our next section, Islamic painting. So Islamic painting emerged within the first few decades of the Muslim empire's expansion, actually, surprisingly. So many people don't think of Islamic paintings as an early Islamic art form, but since the Islamic Empire, the Islamic Caliphate expanded so rapidly, it integrated so many different aspects of distinctly different cultures into the context of Islam, that a lot of these art forms were, they appeared on the scene like that. Like they were really quickly adopted by the Muslims. So the Rashidun Caliphate, under the leadership of Ali ibn Talib, invaded the Sasanian Empire, which is one of the empires that governed the area now known as Iran. So the following reformations made to Sasanian society by the Muslims integrated Islamic theology into the region